This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Parashat Bamidbar. Sefer Bamidbar discusses in the very first parasha about the numbers, the countings of Am Yisrael. That's why when you come to describe the whole Sefer, the whole Chumash of Bamidbar, in English we call it the Book of Numbers. And the reason it's really brought down in the Midrash, it's called the Book of Numbers in Hebrew, it's called the Sefer HaPikudim, the Book of the Accounting. If you stop and think about it, why is it called the Book of the Accounting? I mean, yes, it's true, Parashat Bamidbar deals mostly with the accounting. Yes, it's a significant amount of counting going on in Parashat Bamidbar. But at the same time, we have so many other parashiyot. The whole Chumash talks about so many different stories, different things, events that happen. We have the event of Korach, we have the event of the Meraglim. We have so many things taking place. And to sum it all up in the title of Numbers, of Pikudim, is a little bizarre. It's a little bit strange that that's how we would label the whole Chumash. And if you stop and think about it, why does the Torah, why is it that the Torah kind of seems to be wasting so many psukim on describing exactly how many people were from Shevet Shimon, how many people were from Shevet Reuven, and it goes through and through these lists. You say to yourself, I'm living 3,000 years later. I don't have anything to do with the numbers of how am I supposed to learn from this? What am I supposed to take home from this week's parasha, where the Torah doesn't waste a single letter in any parasha, and certainly not in our parasha. Yet it is described, and it's a focus point, and the whole label of the Chumash is about the counting of Am Yisrael. And that's a question that Rashi addresses in the very beginning of this week's parasha. He says that the reason that Am Yisrael was counted, the reason that HaKadosh Baruch Hu went out of his way to count us as a nation, is for one simple point, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us. Everybody knows that first $1,000 that a person made in his lifetime. First time he got a job, and he was working, and he made $1,000. How much he got that cash or check that he received, and he counts it, and he says $100, $200, $300, and he keeps it by him. He wants to secure it. He's excited about it. It's precious to him because he worked hard for it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu feels Am Yisrael is precious. I counted them once. Yes, when we left Mitzrayim, we counted them. Then we counted them after the sin of the Eged when people died. And here's the third time we're counting them in the second year of the desert because I love Am Yisrael. And part of the steps of becoming a rabbi, of being ordained, person has to know halachot. He has to know laws. Without knowing the laws, he can't become ordained as a rabbi. One of the most basic laws, the elementary rules that a person has to learn, is the halachot that pertain to ta'aruvot, which means forbidden mixtures. So sometimes you have something that is mutar, it's mixing with something that is asur, to be mixed, and the question is, are you allowed to eat it or are you not allowed to eat it? And there the Gemara discusses, well, it depends if there's a majority or there's no majority. If there's a majority, so under certain circumstances you can rely on the majority. And then the Gemara makes a qualification. One of the qualifications, let's say I have, for example, 1,000 eggs. And I know for a fact 999 of them, kasher. No problem. They're all kasher. Except for one. I don't know which one. One of them is no good. So I say to myself, okay, well, 999 are good. The Torah says you go after the majority. And this is a majority. Chachamim tell you, the rabbis say not so fast. Eggs is special. What's special about eggs? Because when you go to the store, you don't go tell the store owner, give me a bucket of eggs. I'll take a bucket of them. No, it's sold by the dozen. It's sold by specific enumeration, numbers. And that is called in halakha davar shebeminyan. Anything that is counted, that's not sold in let's say for example, watermelon seeds. You don't count every single watermelon seed, you just put it in the pack and that's good enough. And you buy the pack. It doesn't matter to you if it's 100 or 101. There's no significance to the individual. It's to the whole unit. That's called something that's not so important. But something that is important, you count it individually. So eggs, you go by the dozen. There's 12 of them. You pay by the dozen of them. So each one has its own value, its own set amount. Therefore, the Gemara says, something that has its own importance, its own counting, is not batil. Even if you have 1,000 kasher, and one that's not kasher, it's never going to be nullified, because it has its own importance and significance. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, same thing is true by Am Yisrael. If I just let him go, I say, you know what, it's just whatever. It's a lot of people, yeah. We got the point, it's a lot of people. No. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that's not how these things work. It's not about the fact that it's together. It's about each individual. I want everybody to understand. I'm counting each Jew in Am Yisrael because each person is important. None of them are nullified to the general rule, to the guidelines of everybody. Each one is a specific mitzvah. There is no such thing as generalization with Am Yisrael. We are all unique. We are all special. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, yes, pointed out every single person. It was worth it to spend all that ink, to use up all that ink, to teach Am Yisrael, no, you are important. As an individual, you're important. Sometimes, especially people in the yeshivot, but anybody really, it's easy to get lost in the commotion. A lot of times you have a massive yeshivot. You have like a yeshiva like the Mir Yeshiva, Lakewood Yeshiva, big time yeshivot, where you're talking about thousands of students. And you're there as one individual and you say to yourself, what am I contributing? What do I have to add to the Torah? Look how many people around me, greater than me, know much more than me, learning far longer than I have, more committed to the Torah. What am I really adding? How do I identify myself as being unique and different? And that is a hard thing to get out of, to break out of. But what the Torah teaches us over here, and the word in Hebrew that we use to count, we say tisa or naso. Count Am Yisrael. I want you to count them. Another definition of the word naso means to lift. HaKadosh Baruch Hu vaynaterem vaynaseem kol yemei olam. HaKadosh Baruch Hu lifted us. When a person is counted as an individual, he's uplifted. That means that I am important. I am as crucial as anybody else is to this unit of Am Yisrael. Rav Moshe Feinstein makes an excellent point based on the Tosfot. The Tosfot asks a question. We know that Bamidbar always happens before Shavuot. Bamidbar is the parasha that we read before Shavuot every single year. So Tosfot asks, why? Why Bamidbar? Why don't we read what naturally would take place is Bechukotai, should be read right before Shavuot? Why do we make sure that doesn't happen? And he explains, because we know the time of Shavuot is the time that the world is judged on the fruits of the land. The fruits are being judged on Shavuot. This is the time of the Bikurim, the time that the fruits start growing already. And therefore the judgment of the world for how profitable and how beneficial the products will be of the fruits are judged during this time of the year. So, says the Tosfot, one of the things we try to refrain from doing is showing signs, showing indication of problems. We don't want to be poteach pela satan. We don't want to open our mouths in a negative way that might affect the bracha. And we know Parashat Bechukotai talks about the klalot. If we don't perform Torah and mitzvot properly, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu says I'm going to take away the rains, and you're not going to have good produce. And we don't want to mention that right before we come into Shavuot when we're being judged on the fruits. Therefore we make a separation. We have Parashat Bamidbar. So Tosfot gives us a negative reason why to not read Bechukotai. Fine. Rav Moshe Feinstein says that's nice. But what's the positive reason to read Parashat Bamidbar before Shavuot? Meaning we're not reading any other parasha. We're not reading Behar. We're not reading Naso. We're reading Bamidbar. What's the reason why we should read Bamidbar specifically? And Rav Moshe Feinstein says an excellent point, because we're about to receive the Torah. We're about to go ahead. And each one of us in every single generation is receiving the Torah anew. A person has to say to himself, he has to realize that even though we might think that what am I compared to the Gdolei Ador? Yeah, we have great Talmidei Chachamim, we had Chazon Ish, we had Rav Moshe Feinstein, we had Chacham Ovadia, we have great leaders today, we have great leaders in Am Yisrael. And one could argue to himself and he could say, I don't have what to contribute to Torah. I'm just a simple person. I go to work 9 to 5. I get back home. I have to take care of the family. I don't have much time. I don't know how to read so well. What am I already contributing to learning? And says the parasha that you're counted just as much as Moshe Rabbeinu is counted. You're counted just as much as Aaron HaKohen is counted. He's a one and you're a one. There is nothing more about him than about you. They're both equal. Everybody has their own mission. Moshe Rabbeinu, he had a very big mission, and he fulfilled it. And he got credit as one individual. He was a one. fulfilled the mission. You have your mission, and you have to fulfill it. No different than Moshe Rabbeinu. You're just as special, you're just as unique. And that's a lesson that we have to go into Shavuot and understand that I have the ability, and I am responsible to contribute to the Torah in whatever sense I could. Whether it is through chesed, kindness, whether it's through the learning itself, whether it's participating, questioning, analyzing, coming up with my own ideas, my own answers, my own explanations, we have an obligation and a responsibility and a gift to be able to participate in the beauty and the acceptance of the Torah. No differently than Moshe Rabbeinu, no differently than the Gdolei Ador. That's a powerful lesson. When we realize that's our responsibility, then we start behaving with the potential that we have. That motivates us. When we understand that we have what to say, that we're part of the conversation, that our Torah is meaningful to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then we begin to really exercise our abilities. And this is what we find in the converse that the story goes, that you had a certain city. And in the city, there were exactly 10 people. And every day they would all come on time to Shacharit, that they would pray together. And it was great. They never missed a minyan. Everybody came. All of a sudden, there were new people moving in, and another family moved in. And the father also was coming to Beit HaKnesset. And lo and behold, there were now 11 people showing up to Beit HaKnesset. 11 individuals came to the Beit HaKnesset. Okay, 1 week passes, 2 weeks passes, minyan, smooth, everything's beautiful. After a few weeks, what happens is, one of the people realizes he has something very urgent he has to take care of. And, it's a few minutes before Uvad Etzion, they're wrapping up the tefillah, they haven't really finished yet, but you really got to get going. He says, you know what, there's already a minyan without me, I don't need to stay for the minyan, there's 10. He walks out. No harm, no foul, nobody's hurt because there's 10 people. He walked out, Shalom Yisrael, they finished the tefillah, everything was fine. It was the first time that ever happened. A week passes, 2 weeks passes, and another individual. All of a sudden, 11 people, he needs to leave early, something urgent. He goes, he walks out, leaves the minyan with 10 people, no harm, no foul. And then comes the day, after a few weeks, where 2 people are absent to the tefillah. And it's the first time they didn't have a minyan. They didn't have a minyan. What's the psychology? Why does that happen? Because everybody relies on the other person. Nobody says, I am responsible to be here. It is my obligation, it is my potential that I have to maximize. No, he can handle it, it'll be all right. And then a person doesn't maximize himself. He relinquishes his own responsibility. And the Torah teaches us, that's really a lesson for life. When we consider and we say to ourselves, it's okay, Ramosha Feinstein will take care of it, or the rabbi will take care of it, or Peloni Almoni will take care of it, then we relinquish our own responsibilities and we don't live up to our own potential. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no, I care about you as an individual to do what you can do. Don't pin it on others. Go and fulfill your potential in life. And that way you can accomplish the most that you can be. The Rama Mipano, he says that every single individual, there's 600,000 members in Am Yisrael. He says in the Sefer Torah, there's 600,000 letters in Sefer Torah. Now we know, one could argue, well, today there's more than 600,000 people in Am Yisrael, but it doesn't really make a difference because we all stem from those 600,000 people. So we all are part of the unit of 600,000. That number never changes, even if us as Am Yisrael change. And he says that is very important because really what happens here is it corresponds. Every letter in Sefer Torah corresponds to another Jew. Every member in Am Yisrael, 600,000 members, 600,000 letters in Sefer Torah, we correspond to a letter in Sefer Torah. Now we know the halacha is by a Sefer Torah. If you're missing a yud in Parashat Bereshit from the Sefer Torah, I don't care if you're reading Parashat Zota Beracha, which is 52 parashiyot away. It doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make a difference. That Sefer Torah is pasul because you're missing a yud. Somewhere in that Sefer Torah you're missing a letter. That whole Sefer Torah is pasul. That's how we have to view ourselves. When a person is missing in action, it's not just that he's affecting himself. It's not just that he's not fulfilling his own potential. He's messing up the entire Sefer Torah. That whole Sefer Torah is now missing a letter. That whole Sefer Torah is not worth anything. Because this person is not living to his potential. This is the level of if we don't carry out our mission in life, if we go ahead and we don't fulfill what we need to fulfill, then we are just hurting everybody else. And there's another halakha by a Sefer Torah. What happens if there's one letter that is attached to another letter. Sefer Torah is also pasul. Every single letter has to be surrounded by its own airspace, by its own open area. The same thing is true. Am Yisrael, nobody can cross paths. Everybody has their specific, unique mission that they have to fulfill. If somebody comes and tries to become someone else, I want his mission. I'm just a Yud. I want to be a Shin. Shin has 3 Yudin. I'm just one. He tries to be him. He tries to connect to him. You make the whole Sefer Torah pasul. That's not your purpose. That's not where you're supposed to be. Fulfill what you can be. Do what you're capable of doing. The second topic that we find in this week's parasha is the concept of the flags. The flags, Am Yisrael, they are designated to be in their certain encampment. Every Shvatim, there were 4 sides, 3 Shvatim on each side. They would encamp in a specific way. The Mishkan was in the middle. Am Yisrael, after the Levi'im, would surround it, and then out of that outer circle was the Erev Rav and the rest of the people that were Tameh and V'chule. There was a certain design way that they would arrange themselves. And each one of the Shvatim, the 12 Shvatim, each one carried their own flag. Everybody had a flag. And it was unique to them. The color was unique. Commentaries point out that the same color that was on the Choshen, it's like we had 12 stones on the Choshen, each one was different. That was the color that they had on the flag. And each flag had its own little symbol on it. Like, for example, the Ibn Ezra writes, for Reuven there was a human being, an image of a human being for Reuven. Yehudah famously was the lion. Then you had Ephraim was an ox, as representative Bechor Shoro, the ox of Yosef. And then you had Dan. It says that what was Dan? There was an eagle. He says that Dan was an eagle. He had a picture of an eagle. Every one of the flags had its own representative. And you ask yourself a question. Parashat Bamidbar starts, and the commandment begins during the second year that they left Mitzrayim. Meaning, they were out of Mitzrayim already for a whole year. It's the second month of the second year, which means there was over a year since they left Mitzrayim. And only now HaKadosh Baruch Hu commands them that they should arrange in flags and different formations and have their own specific, unique talents that they should organize. Why? Why not do it in the beginning? Now, Am Yisrael, when they left Mitzrayim, they didn't leave b'chipazon in the sense that they just kind of fled Egypt. They didn't flee Egypt. It says, Uvnei Yisrael yotzeim b'yad ramah. Am Yisrael left with a strong hand. They left. They weren't scared. They weren't nervous. They left with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They were singing and rejoicing. So they didn't scramble around as they were leaving. They had the potential to organize and have the ability to join together. Why didn't they do that right when they left Mitzrayim, when it would have been the most logical time to organize into the tribes and into everything else? Says Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, says, first of all, you have to understand, what's the significance of the flags? Think about it. Why do we have flags? Why should each Shevet just have Magen David, have the Israeli state flag, and that's it for all of Am Yisrael? Why do you need each one of the tribes to have their own flag? He says, first of all, the flags is not just some sort of nationalism, patriotism type thing. It was the essence of who that Shevet was. It depicted who it was, because each Shevet had their own talents and had their own strengths, and they had to live with their strengths, and they had to rise to the potential of who they were. Every one of the Shvatim. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have really introduced it right when they left Mitzrayim. Sounds like the logical step, but there was a big problem. If right when you leave Mitzrayim, everybody has their own flag, you know what that's going to do? Then Yehudah is going to become his own nation. And God is going to be his own nation. Reuven is going to decide, well, I'm really the one with the most potential, and he's going to separate to become. There wouldn't be any unifying force. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I'm going to wait. What are you waiting for? I'm waiting for the giving of the Torah. I'm waiting for the building of the Mishkan. Let us unify all of Am Yisrael under the banner of the Torah. Once you have that bedrock, you have that foundation, yes, now you can go ahead and be unique. Because to be unified, you don't necessarily need uniformity. And that's an important thing. People conflate the two terms. Uniformity and unification. They're two separate things. Am Yisrael could be unified, and I could be Sfaradi, and my friend over here could be Ashkenazi, and we can have a Chasidi, and he could be wearing tefillin his way, and we could be wearing tefillin our way, and we could do things a little bit differently. And our talit could be white, and his talit could be black, and we're all unified. even though we express our ways a little bit differently, but we have one force that puts us together, and that's called the Torah. That's called the 613 mitzvot. We're a unit of Am Yisrael. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying to us, once we have that unity in Am Yisrael, yes, every person has to fulfill his personal potential. Now, go ahead and carry your flag. Be different. Be unique, because that's important for you. Don't try to be someone else. Don't try to be who you are not. It's important. You have to have role models. Yes, that's for sure true. But it's not about mimicking. You're not supposed to be a monkey that just copies other people. You're supposed to see what they do and apply it to yourself and your talents and your capabilities. Be inspired to attribute it, to find a way to apply it to oneself. That is the correct mentality to have. And a person has to understand that his potential is different than his friend. And therefore he has to go ahead and do what he does right. And this is what it says when Am Yisrael, they saw the angels. They saw that the angels would group themselves into flags and into their own divisions. And Am Yisrael became jealous that they wanted their own flags. They wanted to be like them. It makes no sense. Why are you jealous of the angels that have flags? What does that even mean? But the pshat is like we're saying now. It's not the point that the angels had flags and they wanted flags too. It's that the angels understood. Michael was Michael. He didn't try to be Gabriel. Gabriel didn't say, well, I want to be the one that heals everybody. I want to be Raphael. Why should I be Gabriel? And Michael didn't say, I don't want to serve Am Yisrael. I want to go ahead and be Malach HaMavet, or the Malach HaMavet in the reverse. Everybody said, I have my own job. I have my responsibility. I'm not trying to be other person. I have my flag. And Am Yisrael saw that the angel's mentality was, it's about me. It's not me trying to be him. Sometimes people say, if only I had his money, and his good heart, and his wonderful lifestyle, I would be great. I would do so many mitzvot, I would have so much time on my hand, be able to learn Torah, and everything would be great. How about the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew that, and He could have made you whoever you wanted to be, and He chose to make you who you are? Maybe because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to worship Him as you are now, with whatever problems and whatever difficulties you have, and apply that to the worshiping of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Maybe that's what really HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants of us. If you look at the Ramban, he says something wonderful and really, really powerful, meaningful in this week's parasha. He tells us that Shevet Levi, the tribe of Levi, the Kohanim of Am Yisrael, the Levi'im of Am Yisrael. How many were there of the Shevet Levi? After you go all the counting, they were counted differently, they weren't counted together with all of Am Yisrael. You get to the calculation, says the Ramban, they didn't even match up to half of the smallest Shevet. They were less than half of the smallest of the Shvatim. And the Ramban says, I don't get it. All the Shvatim were taken into exile. And they had to work for Paro Melech Mitzrayim. They were enslaved. Could they even have time to think about having children? Forget about it, having children. Shevet Levi was the only tribe that was free from the bondage, from the slavery. They didn't participate. They were not affected in the least bit from the slavery of Paro Melech Mitzrayim. They had great lives. They could live freely, prosperously, do whatever they chose to do. And you ask yourself, how is it possible that this Shevet that had the best, that had the greatest time in Mitzrayim, they are the ones that are half of all the other Shvatim? And says the Rabban, that's exactly the point. That's actually a proof that Shevet Levi did not go through and did not endure the slavery. Why is that a proof? All the other Shvatim, they couldn't even begin thinking about having children. But what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He said, the Egyptians are trying to minimize your ability to have children. They're trying to drown your children. We'll see who wins this battle, me or the Egyptians. And any person that was enslaved, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Uvnei Yisrael paru vayirbu vayishretzu me'od me'od v'temaleh haaretz otam. That Am Yisrael multiplied in great fashion, in a fashion that was miraculously. But which of Am Yisrael multiplied? The ones that were enslaved. The ones that were in the difficult stress that they were under. HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a miracle for them. And they ended up multiplying in rapid rates that Shevet Levi just couldn't catch up because they were reproducing normally. And you say to yourself, wow, that's such a powerful lesson. If you just stop and think about that for a minute. And you say, Shevet Levi, everybody was jealous of them. Everybody was envious. I wish I was from Shevet Levi. Look at them, they're having such an easy time, and we're working hard, and we have so much difficulty and stress, and we don't make any money, and we're barely able to see our children and our family, and Rahmanan litzlan, people losing their lives around you left and right, and they are made in the shade, and you say to yourself, why can't I be like them? Why can't I worship HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the Beit Midrash like Shevet Levi? But what ended up happening in the long run? Who benefited the most? The one that had the difficult time, the one that was under duress and stress, he ended up succeeding far beyond what he could even imagine. And that is the system that HaKadosh Baruch Hu works with. You might think that he's made in the shade, he's doing great, he's doing wonderful, but in the long run, who ended up benefiting far more? The rest of the Shvatim. Greater, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu says it doesn't work the way you would think it works. It's not mathematics, it's not science, it's God. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs his show very differently. So the exact opposite of what a person would think is what happens. And it's only because Am Yisrael was willing to persevere as who they are and not trying to be who they are not. And today in our society, everybody's trying to be who they're not. We have Hollywood telling us that you have to be like that, and you have to be like this, and you have to make sure that you conform to the standards of the society. You have to be like the rest of the nations. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no, that's not how it works with me. Every member of Am Yisrael is like his own nation. Each one of us is a Umlam Umra'o. That's why it says that Am Yisrael is compared to the stars. What's special about the stars? When you look at the stars, you see there's thousands of them all over the sky. They're little small little dots all over the place. But as you get closer, and as you come within 100 million miles, 50 million miles, 1 million miles, it gets bigger and bigger and becomes massive, that is beyond our scope and our understanding. You can't even get close to it. The heat that it radiates, the energy that it produces, the massiveness of what a star is just unfathomable. That's Am Yisrael. Each one of us is like a star. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you are the real stars. You think Hollywood's the real stars. You're the real stars. Because each one of you is important. You're a world unto itself. The nations of the world, they're units. Yeah, there's the nation of Amalek, there's the nation of Edom, they're units. You, each one of Am Yisrael is a nation. Mamlechet Kohanim v'Goy Kadosh. That's what makes us unique. That's what makes us far more special. If you notice, there's a terminology that's used in the Torah. Words, the grammar that the Torah uses to describe a harlot. Person that conducts himself with immorality. Ayeh HaKiddisha. As we find by Yehuda, he looks for the prostitute. He says, where is the Kiddisha? It's an interesting word. Kiddisha means a harlot, but it really, has in it Kiddusha, holiness. Holiness comprises of the word Kiddisha. And you say to yourself, that can't be a coincidence. I mean, how come the same word that describes holiness is the word that describes harlotry? That's pretty unique. And says, I saw in the Mifashim, in the commentaries, they point out that whenever a person thinks he's sacrificing, I'm sacrificing for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I can't go ahead and have not kosher food, I want that cheeseburger, and I can't have the cheeseburger, or what's wrong with the french fries at McDonald's, why can't I eat the french fries, what's wrong, it's all allowed, it's the same thing, it's just potatoes. And a person has to refrain, even though he might not necessarily understand, and he doesn't necessarily get it, but he refrains from violating halakha. So that person says to himself, I sacrificed for the sake of the Torah. And says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's not how it works in my world. There's no such thing as having to sacrifice for Torah. When a person does things in Kiddusha fashion, when he acts in a holy fashion, he gets the Kiddusha within the Kiddusha. He gets the pleasure. He never loses out from the pleasure. That pleasure actually is expanded and becomes greater because he gets it in a mutar fashion, in a way that is permissible, in a way that is pure, in the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu designed for him to get. And at the end of the day, and this is what we see time and time again in the society we live in, those that run after the pleasure, without boundaries, without limits, they end up depressed. They end up miserable in their lives. And the people that have the control and the containment that are able to withstand their own temptations, they succeed in life. And today in Hollywood, what do we see? Half of Hollywood is going to jail. Because there's the sexual harassment claims, people that cannot control themselves, people that cannot, they thought they were on top of the world. Yeah, we're succeeding, we're doing great. Who can stop us? We're powerful people. We can just do whatever our hearts desire we could do. And all of a sudden they're in jail. and they're going to go ahead, and they're losing all their business and all their money, and they have to go to therapy, and their lives are a miserable mess, and all they want to do is commit suicide. Why? Because they went after the Kiddusha. If they would have gone after the Kiddusha, they would have received holiness and the Kiddusha and the pleasure that they wanted. They would have received everything sevenfold than what they got in their lifetime. And that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us. You do it in my way, on my terms, you won't lose out. You won't fail. How many times have we heard people that said it was difficult for them to keep Shabbat? What do you mean? I need to open the store. If I don't open the store on Shabbat, I'm going to lose so much business. That's when I make all my money. That's when I have to go ahead. Who's going to guarantee that money? Shabbat guarantees the money. The people, those same people, they stopped working on Shabbat. They said, we're not going to do it anymore. Zeu adkan, up till here. And they stopped working. And then they look back in their lives and say, Baruch Hashem, that I was able to do that I was able to overcome. And that's the terms that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world. You don't lose out. Am Yisrael, they couldn't think about having children. And what did they end up with? Much more children than Shevet Levi. Because you don't end up losing out when you do what God wants you. As much as you might think otherwise. The Sefer Imre Noam drives home this point even further. He says that when Leah had Gad, when she had her child, Gad, she said, Ba Gad, Bet Gimel Dalet, Ba Gad, Vatikad Shemo Gad. What's this Ba Gad? So the Imre Noam explains, he says, Ba Gad is really big Gad. Gad is 3 and 4, 7. Big Gad, the person that was born and passed away on the 7th of a month, he will be buried in the portion of Gad. And who is that? Of course, Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. He was buried in Ever HaYarden, although we don't know exactly where he was buried, but we surely do know he was buried in the portion of Gad. Why was he buried in the portion of Gad? The commentaries explain this week's parasha. We find that Shevet Dan was the Bechor. Dan v'Naftali. Right? From the Bnei Hashivcha, Dan was the Bechor. And he received leadership. He was one of the people that was the head of the side that he took. He was the Rosh HaTzava. Okay, Dan received that. So one might think, logically speaking, Gad should also, because Gad and Asher, Gad was also a Bechor for the Shivcha. Yet the Torah says, no, Gad, you're not going to become a leader, you're not one of the Rashim, you're not one of the heads. Now Gad had the opportunity, he had the opening to complain. He could have said, well, it's not fair. Why should Dan, who's also the Bechor of the Shivcha, he gets to be a leader, and I don't get to be a leader? But Gad did not complain. We don't find that Gad complained. And Gad said, if Moshe Rabbeinu tells us that we are not leaders, so we're not leaders. That's it. His word is final. I'm not going to be who HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want me to be. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if that's how you conduct yourself, if you're not going to be jealous of what other people are, and you're going to take your position in life and conduct yourself based on that position, then I'm going to reward you far greater than everybody else. Then you're going to receive the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu residing in your portion. Because of your commitment to me, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, at the end of the day, you're never going to lose out. You're only going to gain. And that's what we find in the parasha, very beginning of this week's parasha, we say, Eliasaph ben Deuel. He was from Shevet Gad. Eliasaph was the Nasi. He was the one that legitimately could have complained, I'm the leader, Eliasaph ben Deuel. Later on in the parasha, after the division of the flags and everything, it calls him Eliasaph ben Reuel. What happened to his name? Typo. First it was Deuel, now it's Reuel. Why is it Reuel? The Gemara says because he was a Re'ah for God. Re'ah means a friend. He became beloved to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He developed a connection. Why? Because he did not hesitate to fulfill the word of God. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, if Moshe Rabbeinu, our leader, says, I will carry, I will do, as he says. And he did not hesitate. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you've developed the strongest bond to Moshe Rabbeinu, and the strongest bond, therefore, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So intuitively, what we might think would be great form of worshipping HaKadosh Baruch Hu says the exact opposite. Sometimes we believe we have our mentalities. We think we understand. You have people, they want the Aliyah to Sefer Torah. How come I didn't receive this Aliyah to Sefer Torah? Because he has the this Aliyah Sefer Torah is the Shishi, is the, Sefer Yonah, it's something special, all these segulot that attribute to it. I want to go ahead and become close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to become close to Him by giving up that Aliyah. Maybe that's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you close. Because would one say, God, you see, if God would have argued for some mundane position, so then we would have had a complaint against him. We said, come on, God, give it up. It's honor. It's matters of honor. Just forget about it. So what? So he won't be honored. Shtiyot. But this isn't about physical kavod honor. God had a point in ruchaniyut, in spirituality. I want to be a leader so I could influence more people in Am Yisrael. He could have argued l'shem shamayim, that I want to be a leader because I feel that I have good potential, I have the capability of guiding Am Yisrael to the Torah mitzvot. But he heard what Moshe Rabbeinu had to say. He says, that's it. I don't care if it's for spiritual reasons, physical reasons, monetary reasons, honorable reasons. It doesn't make a difference. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu says no, then my spirituality says, go ahead, and that's what you're supposed to be doing, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells you to do. And then you don't lose out. A person has to carry out the responsibility that he has. We come to the days of Shavuot, and it's important for us to remember these lessons. The lesson that we are unique. Each one of us, each individual person has to realize that he is receiving the Torah. That his portion will be irreplaceable. There is no way to replace any individual's chelik in the Torah. If you don't do it, no one could do it for you. That's it. It's going to be lost from Am Yisrael. It's going to be a missing letter in Sefer Torah. It's going to be a number that will be removed. Moshe Rabbeinu has a number, you have a number. Everybody has a number in the line, and you have to fulfill your own mission. And Be'ezrat Hashem, we should be zocheh to fulfill our mission in getting close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and realizing the love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu bestows upon us and the care and concern for each individual, that we're not nullified in any majority. We're chashuv, we're important to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And take it and refuel ourselves for the coming holiday of Shavuot to prepare for the receiving of the Torah. Amen ve'amen. Chazakim v'ruchim. Yeah.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.